Emily Parker always believed that marriage was built on trust, understanding, and shared laughter. She and her husband Daniel had been married for 8 years, living in a small suburban town in Oregon. Daniel was a software engineer who often worked from home, while Emily managed a local bookstore that had become her pride and joy. Their life seemed peaceful, until a quiet evening when a small, unassuming message changed everything. It was a Thursday evening. The air outside was crisp with the scent of pine trees and the first hints of autumn. Emily was folding laundry in the living room when Daniel's tablet buzzed on the coffee table. Normally, she never snooped, it wasn't in her nature, but the screen lit up with a message preview that caught her off guard. It was from Michael, their neighbor and Daniel's closest friend. It read, "I can't stop thinking about what we talked about. Thank you for understanding me like no one else does." Emily froze. Her heart didn't race out of suspicion or jealousy, but out of confusion. She knew Michael. He was married to Sarah, one of Emily's closest friends. The four of them often spent weekends together grilling in the backyard, sharing stories and laughter. She couldn't imagine any reason why Daniel and Michael would exchange such intimate messages. That night, Emily barely slept. Questions swirled through her mind, but she told herself not to jump to conclusions. The next morning, she watched Daniel quietly sipping his coffee, his eyes tired but soft. Something in his demeanor felt different, gentle but burdened. Later that day at the bookstore, Emily couldn't focus. She replayed that message again and again. What did "understanding me like no one else does" really mean? She didn't want to believe it was anything inappropriate, but the mystery weighed heavily on her. A few days later, Emily decided to meet Sarah for their usual weekend coffee. They met at a small cafe near the lake, and the autumn sunlight danced on the water as they talked about work, plans, and their husbands. Sarah mentioned that Michael and Daniel had been spending more time together recently, helping each other with projects, meeting up after work. She laughed lightly, saying, "Sometimes I feel like they're closer than we are." Emily smiled politely, but her heart tightened. That comment echoed in her mind for the rest of the day. The following week, Daniel and Michael hosted a small neighborhood dinner. Everything felt normal: laughter, food, and warmth. But Emily couldn't shake the feeling that Daniel's glances toward Michael held something unspoken: respect, maybe admiration, but there was also an emotional depth that confused her. That night, after the guests left, Emily approached Daniel gently. "Is there something you want to tell me?" she asked, her tone calm, not accusing. Daniel froze for a moment before setting down his glass. His eyes glistened, his lips trembling slightly. "Emily," he whispered, "there's something I've been trying to understand about myself. And I didn't know how to tell you." The room fell silent except for the sound of the ticking clock. Daniel took a deep breath. "I care about you deeply. You're my best friend. But lately, I've realized I have feelings I didn't expect, for someone else." Emily's heart sank, but she forced herself to breathe. "For Michael?" she asked softly. He nodded, his eyes filled with tears. "I didn't plan it. It's not what you think. It's not about attraction in the way people assume. It's about connection, understanding. He listens to me in a way that makes me feel seen. But I don't want to lose you, Emily. You're my home." Tears welled in Emily's eyes, but her voice remained gentle. "Thank you for telling me the truth," she said quietly. "That means everything." That night, they sat together in silence, both trying to process emotions that neither of them had ever anticipated. Emily didn't feel anger. She felt heartbreak, confusion, and above all, compassion. Over the next few days, Emily found herself reflecting deeply. Love, she realized, wasn't always straightforward. People grow, change, and sometimes discover things about themselves they never expected. What mattered most was honesty and how one chose to handle those discoveries. Daniel began seeing a counselor to understand his emotions better, and Emily supported that choice. They decided to take time apart, not as a separation, but as a way to find clarity. Emily stayed with her sister for a few weeks, spending quiet mornings walking by the lake, journaling her thoughts. One morning, she wrote, "Love is not about possession. It's about understanding. Even if life changes, kindness should remain." Weeks later, Daniel invited her to dinner at their favorite restaurant. He looked calmer, clearer. "Emily," he said sincerely, "I've learned a lot. What I felt wasn't something to be ashamed of, it was a sign that I needed to understand myself better. But I also realized that my bond with you is the most real thing I've ever had. I want to rebuild us, with honesty." Emily smiled faintly, tears in her eyes. "I believe in second chances when they come with truth." Months passed. They both continued therapy and learned to communicate more openly. Emily also developed a friendship with Sarah and Michael again, but this time with better boundaries and respect. There was no bitterness, only growth. In time, Emily and Daniel found a new rhythm. It wasn't about pretending nothing happened, but about acknowledging their journey with honesty. Their marriage transformed into a partnership built on authenticity, compassion, and self-awareness. Years later, when Emily looked back on that chapter, she didn't see betrayal, she saw courage. The courage to face the truth, to heal, and to love differently. As she narrated her story in her YouTube video, she ended with words that resonated deeply. Sometimes, the hardest truths lead us to the kindest endings. And love, real love, isn't about perfect people. It's about imperfect souls choosing to be honest, kind, and brave enough to grow together.